outsiders, it was the hermit kingdom. To mapmakers, it was Chosun. To the Mongols and the Manchus, the Chinese and the Japanese, it was a tributary, a colony. To Americans who fought there this mid-century, it was the Punch Bowl and Pork Chop Hill. To TV fans, it's where the series MASH takes place. To athletes of the 24th Olympiad, it's where the gold medals were awarded. But to those who really know this country, it's a modern miracle. Tour dazzling Seoul, where ancient pagodas reside amid gleaming skyscrapers. See some of the most impressive Olympic sites ever built. Visit Gyeongju, capital of the ancient Shilla Kingdom and home of its cultural treasures. Kaesong, the ancient capital of the Goryeo dynasty. The island of Jeju-do, the Hawaii of Korea. Mount Soraksan National Park, the spectacular scenic playground of the Korean people. And Panmunjom, where the armistice was signed and negotiations between North and South Korea continue today. The wonders and sights of the land of enduring pride and spirit, Korea.
He's smiling to himself.
This sculpture is a Korean national treasure.
His thoughts are turned inward, transcending time and space.
It's an ancient artist's representation of a Buddha of the future, of an era yet to come. But in a larger sense, this sculpture has come to symbolize the gentleness, the princely manners, the hopes, and the vision of the people of the Republic of Korea.
When he leaves his inner thoughts and raises his eyes to us, it will be to say, now the future has arrived.
Korea's pursuit of happiness has been upstream all the way. Roughly the size of New York State and shaped like a rabbit, it's always been a land bridge for aggressive neighbors surrounding it. Across the Yellow Sea to the west is ancient Chungko, now the People's Republic of China. In the north, beyond the Yalu and the Tumen rivers, are the Mongolian provinces of China and the Soviet Union. To the southeast, only 120 miles away, lie the islands of Japan. Korea has always been their buffer state. Korea has a long, often tragic history. War, destruction, occupation, exploitation. That history began about 5,000 years ago, when tribes from North Central Asia began migrating to the peninsula.
In those days, the god Hwanung came down from heaven to live in the world of humans. And a she-bear who dwelt in a cave was transformed into a woman. And the woman bore Hwanung a son called Tangun. and for 1,500 years, Tangun ruled the land of bright morning.
King Tangun, the legendary founder of Korea, the land of bright morning, is said to have ascended his throne in 2333 BC, the year that until recently was the starting point of the Korean calendar. It reflects 40 centuries of fighting invaders, invasion by Asian neighbors, and invasion by Caucasian strangers. But in our age, something remarkable has happened. Now, Korea isn't fighting invaders anymore. Now this land has opened its arms. Come, invade us, shouting with characteristic politeness, invade us, please. We're ready. In 1988, Korea served as the host nation for the 24th International Olympics, and troops of travelers invaded the land with suitcases and cameras to learn for themselves just why these smiling people were so confident of their readiness. It's astounding that from the wintry way of the elders could spring the youthful optimism that energizes Korean society today. Yet, pagodas of the past stand proudly amid the skyscrapers. It's a metropolis with manners. What wellspring of confidence prompted the polite Koreans to play house to the world's greatest sporting event? First, an ancient commitment to human perfection and the training and discipline to achieve it. These underscore the meaning of the Olympic Games. Secondly, a passion for sport that goes back centuries. Thirdly, the organizational know-how to manage such an event smoothly, safely, and make it fun. Then, taking into account the dazzling sports facilities constructed in Seoul to accommodate the thousands of spectators that attended the Games. The lush Olympic Park. A splendid sports complex for basketball, baseball. Also, an Olympic gymnasium seating 20,000. In these arenas, sports fans from around the globe witness spectacular athletic accomplishments, where American athletes distinguish themselves in some of the most demanding competition in the world. From conquering feats to colorful pageantry, the Korean people emerged victorious. Their gold medal presentation bestowed to the world the true heart and soul of the Olympic Games. Not limited to just Olympic excellence, Seoul alone is home to 100 world-class hotels. Or if the visitor is adventurous, one can arrange lodging at a traditional inn, or with a family in a private home. Seoul is the cultural and entertainment center of Korea. and its transportation system. There are 4 major subway systems. Plenty of efficient intercity buses and an abundance of ready taxis. There are state-of-the-art hospitals and medical facilities. Its places of worship welcome visitors. Buddhist temples. Churches. Catholic. Protestant. Evangelical. And mosques in cities such as Seoul and Busan. Its abundance of newspapers, including 2 English-language dailies and a French-language weekly.
Being at home in Seoul is much different from the bustle outside. Elders are still shown great respect and courtesy. Children obey their parents and strive always to do their very best in school. At the table, a youngster would not think of touching his chopsticks before the elders had picked up theirs. Discipline is frequent but kind. Though parents exert much influence on the selection of a mate, today's young people fall in love and marry, just as they do in the movies. Museums that are most fun are the ones without walls. Just a half-hour south of Seoul is a wonderful folk museum in a park. There's a village here where people dress and live and work just as they did in olden times. There are royal buildings and cozy houses of the humble and mansions of the rich from every region in Korea. Craftsmen apply their skills. Merchants peddle their wares for won, the Korean currency. When families relax, it is to celebrate a wedding, perhaps with the bride wearing the traditional yellow and blue jacket and pink skirt, or to attend the performance of ancient Korea's equivalent to a satirical comedy review. Or to join in a harvest dance celebrating a bumper crop.
On the eastern side of the peninsula lies the city of Gyeongju, ancient capital of the Shilla Kingdom. Mount Tahamsan rises near the ancient city. They once believed the mountain to be the home of many nature spirits, benevolent ones, fortunately. But spirits were no stranger to the ancient Koreans. The first glimmer of religious consciousness came with shamanism.
In those days, the sky was filled with dragons. Legions of spirits dwell in the mountains and in the sea, in forests, and in the entrails of the earth. Only shamans could appease them.
Traces of shamanism are seen today in certain customs and festivals. Indeed, one can still find country folk who, in a case of illness, will summon a shaman before sending for a doctor. Women, they believe, make better shamans than men, and blind shamans are best. The city itself, though modern, is studded with burial mounds that date back 2,000 years, when kings were buried with all of their belongings. 200 such mounds within the city limits, and 100 more outside of them. One tomb alone yielded a trove of 10,000 objects.
They've named the tomb where this painting was found the Heavenly Horse. A golden girdle with pendants. Earrings.
Drinking vessels of gold. And a golden crown, remarkably preserved after being buried under tons of rock and dirt for a couple of thousand years.
Many, many centuries ago, 3 kingdoms ruled in the land of bright morning.
The kingdom of Koguryo was founded in 73 BC by tribes that moved down from the Yalo River Valley. For centuries, Koguryo was the strongest power on the peninsula. The tomb walls of their kings are decorated with the finest frescoes of northeastern Asia. The southwest spawned Pekshe in the 3rd century AD. Pekshe reached a lofty state of development and shared its hard-won knowledge of astronomy, metallurgy, medicine, and music with Japan.
They must have been a happy people. Their Buddhas are always smiling.
Not for long. It's told that 5,000 Pekshe maidens leaped to their death from this rock rather than face victorious invaders. In the 4th century AD, the tiny kingdom of Shilla emerged. But territorially, Shilla kept growing, absorbing smaller states. And then Pekshe. and finally, Koguryo. Silla also absorbed Buddhist philosophy and culture from China.
All that we are is a result of what we have thought, is founded on our thoughts, is made up of our thoughts. Gazing at this figure, one is a glimmer of how deep their commitment was to the Buddhist way of life.
This figure is known throughout the world as the pinnacle of Buddhist art.
The Bulguksa Temple compound. The prayer hall is particularly beautiful. This pagoda is Silla art at its finest.
This temple bell, cast in 770 AD, is the biggest of its kind in South Korea. Despite its weight and massiveness, it's delicately decorated in arabesque designs. This magnificent structure, the Temple of Buddha Land. In the front yard stand two pagodas, the Pagoda of Many Treasures and the Pagoda of Buddha.
Local people call them Pagoda of Shadow and Pagoda of No Shadow.
The Star Tower, an ancient meteorological and astrological observatory, the oldest still standing in Eastern Asia. Yet the kingdom prudently put some of its energy into building high, thick walls to keep out invaders.
The fear of invasion was always with them.
Going southward about 2.5 miles, one reaches 5 tombs and the stone abalone-shaped arbor.
At one time, this arbor was a banquet place for kings. Wine cups floated in this stone channel during the royal feasts.
At the seacoast, not far from the city, there's an underwater tomb. A king named Munmo commanded that his ashes be interred under the sea. It was his final heroic act of patriotism.
He would become a sea dragon, he believed, so that even after his death, he could protect his country from invaders. It's only an hour by air from Seoul to the Jeju-do, a larger island among the 3,300 scattered along our coasts. Jeju-do is sometimes called the Hawaii of Korea. The botanical garden here nurtures over 1,500 species of semi-tropical plants. Below Mount Hallasan, the highest peak in South Korea, there is rolling pasture. There's a legend on Jeju-do, or perhaps it is a true story. Once there was a beautiful woman who had everything to live for. But because her husband believed that she had been unfaithful, she took her own life from the steep seaside slope. Now her innocent spirit dwells in this rock. Truth or legend? The island people have built a grotto shrine in her honor. In every village of the island, these stone carvings are posted. They are guardians. Here, the fishermen petition the Dragon King for good catches and a rich harvest from the sea. But not all of Jeju-do's fishermen are men. Women divers work the ocean floor for shellfish. Fish caught here is famous for its flavor. But some come here simply to be close to nature.
When the Shilla kingdom declined, a new dynasty was founded. The Korea, which reigned for almost 500 years.
It is from this dynasty that Korea gets its name.
The Korea made their capital at what is now the city of Kaesong. Korea kings were deeply committed to the Buddhist way of life. Princes and nobles followed the example of Buddhism's Indian founder, Prince Siddhartha, and entered the priesthood. Buddhism was the state religion in Korea under the Korea. Many of their best-loved festivals, Wesak during the spring and the Harvest Moon celebration during autumn, originated in Buddhism. In its highest practice, Buddhism is a non-theistic philosophy. It demands rigid discipline as practiced by these Son monks of Korea. Son is better known in the West by its Japanese name, Zen. Korea exploded with artistic activity and invention. Recently, a kiln site for Celadon ceramics was discovered. Korea potters developed a technique of inlaying metal into ceramics of lustrous jade green glaze. Their classical perfection of line and color give them an unchallenged reputation as works of the highest standards. Today, these pieces are prized by collectors all over the world. But the crowning achievement was the printing of the Tripitaka. It took 16 years to hand cut the 31,137 printing blocks required to publish the 5,000 volumes of the Korean Tripitaka of Buddhist scriptures. Today, the blocks, together with the scriptures printed from them, are preserved in the Haein Temple of South Korea. This spurred an era of literary activity, the publishing of a national history, and in the year 1232, the invention of movable type, fully 200 years before Gutenberg would be credited with that invention in Europe. The Korea had reached a pinnacle of Far Eastern civilization. And then, invasion. Invasion, which will lash and cripple the Korean people for more than 1,000 years to come. After years of being harassed by the Mongols, the Korea kings capitulated to Genghis Khan. Korea trembled under the Mongol occupation. The arts declined. Mongol overlords wrested huge taxes from the Korean people to support the Mongol court. Korean men and Korean ships were forced to serve in the Mongol sea invasions of Japan. The invasions failed. But when the Korean people revolted against their Mongol masters, they did not fail. Like most of us, Koreans love to play. Their favorite playground is Soraksan, meaning snow-covered mountain, crowning a range of rugged Asian Alps. Its name has been given to the national park fanning out from it. Its peaks challenge mountaineers. Its forests, hikers. At the Dragon Valley Resort, they're skiing all year round. Or for some, to simply bask in the seasonal beauty of this spectacular park.
A shopping spree in Seoul vies for a visitor's attention. For handicrafts, out-of-way places turn out the best bargains. Our new shopping malls make a visitor feel right at home. There are so many things to buy. Even Paris fashions. Yet most Koreans cling to our traditional dress, at least on special occasions. Women find the hanbok most comfortable. We love to wear white for its purity and try always to wear it on religious occasions. Our neighbors used to call us the nation of white-clad citizens. Seoul is alive with art, some of it very modern. Much of the ancient art is housed in the National Museum. There are galleries housing contemporary art also. Ancient or modern, one theme underscores Korean art: harmony with nature. This feeling for harmony is seen in the landscaping that the palace of Korea's last monarchs is set in. The throne hall is the largest of its kind in a wooden structure. The kings held banquets at this pavilion. This 10-story pagoda is an architectural marvel.
The last line of Korean kings were the Yi, ruling what they called the Choson Kingdom from the 14th to the 20th centuries. They centered their government here in Seoul, which means the capital.
Those who are born wise are the highest type of people. Those who become wise through learning come next.
After being Buddhist for 8 centuries, Korea made Confucianism the state religion.
Confucius taught 5 guiding principles. The first, respect for learning.
And learning flourished during the Yi dynasty. Books were written on medicine, ethics, and music. A medical encyclopedia of 266 volumes was published. This devotion to learning brought about dramatic changes. Until the turn of the 15th century, the Korean language was written in Chinese characters. This was awkward and often inadequate. Most responsible for this brilliant age of enlightened culture, King Sejong commanded his scholars to create a new script for written Korean. After 4 tedious years, Hangul, the Korean alphabet, was born. This pursuit of learning fueled the sciences. A rainfall gauge was developed in 1442. An observatory was built with its own automatic time and weather indicator. A water clock. The arts, too, were encouraged. White porcelain was developed. Utilitarian in use, its simple, original shapes express the Korean love of plainness and sincerity. It's still regarded as among the best porcelains in the world.
The second principle of Confucius, a simple life.
From the highest to the humblest, the Korean people strove for harmony, balancing heaven and earth with fragile humanity.
The third principle of Confucius, honest attitude.
Rules guided every kind of behavior between ruler and subject, husband and wife, parent and child, older brother and younger brother, friend and friend. Rules that influence Korean society to this very day.
The fourth principle, love to spirit.
Perhaps it's Confucius who should take credit for the Koreans being among the most polite people on earth.
The fifth principle of Confucius, devotion to family.
Even today, wherever they go, Korean families are remarkably well-knit. Everything, from ethics in business to grades in school, is a matter of family pride.
When Confucius was asked what 3 essentials must a government have, the master answered, enough food, enough soldiers, and the people's confidence. Suppose you had to give up one of those 3. The questioner went on, which one would you let go? The soldiers, answered Confucius.
But soldiers are just what the Korean kingdom needed in 1592. Invasion. This time from Japan. Shogun Totomi Hideyoshi had launched a force equipped with firearms acquired from the West. In less than 3 weeks, it had captured Seoul. Korea's national existence was at stake. Then, as though by providence, Admiral Yi Sun-shin took command and became a national hero. He encountered the invading Japanese flotilla with a craft that he himself had developed. The Turtle warship, defeating the enemy in battle after battle. We can see a replica of the Turtle warship here. It was the first ironclad vessel in naval history. It drove the invaders back to their own shores. In 1627, they were again invaded, this time by the Manchu, who eventually reduced the proud nation to vassalage. Is it a wonder then that Korea turned its back on the encroaching world and became the hermit kingdom? Just let us alone, they said. These castle walls, high and thick, were built to repel the dreaded invaders who for centuries had swarmed to batter them. Now these walls imprisoned the people they were built to protect. There were cracks in the cultural wall that isolated Korea from the rest of the world. Missionaries. Initially, Christian missionaries from China who claimed some 10,000 Korean converts by the middle 1800s. To the closed-off Kingdom of Korea, this hearkened another invasion, an invasion of alien ideas bent on subverting the Confucianist state. In 1866, 9 Jesuit priests who had illegally sneaked into Korea and several of their Korean followers were beheaded. That same year, missionary Robert Thomas became the first Protestant martyr.
In those days, anyone caught smuggling a foreign book, especially a Bible, was executed. A student was returning to his homeland. He was one of 3 Korean students returning from China after studying with a teacher of medicine who was a Christian. For 3 years, their teacher had read to them daily from the Bible. At the completion of their studies, each student had decided to take a Bible with him back to Korea, even though the penalty was death. The first and second student had set out with the books carefully concealed in their backpacks. At the border, they were searched by the guards who discovered the Bibles and beheaded them. When the third student had crossed the border, the guards had searched him but found nothing forbidden. So he had been allowed to continue on his way to the home of his sister. There began a long and difficult task, unraveling the ropes that had held his pact and ironing flat hundreds of pages of writing. For this student had woven the pages of his Bible into pack ropes.
Little by little, Korea, like a stubborn oyster, was being pried open. The United States was seeking fueling ports in the Pacific. It had already wrenched an agreement with Japan, but only after Commodore Perry had appeared in Yokohama's Uraga Bay with warships. Admiral Rogers of the U.S. Pacific Fleet Command attempted the same thing in Korea. The Koreans fired on him with their shore guns. Korea's regent blustered, "There are only 2 choices when Western barbarians invade us, fight or surrender." Eventually, diplomatic relations were established with the United States. Then, Great Britain and Germany, Italy, Russia, France. American missionaries were given free access to the Korean people. By 1907, there were already over 1,000 churches. The defeat of Imperial Russia by the Japanese in the War of 1904-05 established Japan as a world power. Great Britain and the United States recognized Japan's prerogatives, military, economic, and political, in the Korean Peninsula. Then, on August 22nd of 1910, Korea was simply annexed to Japan. 4,243 years after the legendary founding of their sovereign realm, Koreans found themselves second-class citizens in their own country. Japan's policy in Korea was ambitious. It improved Korean industry, but only to meet the needs of Japan's own economy. It increased agricultural production, but Korean rice was exported to Japan while Korean farmers went hungry. It was a police state. An underground independence movement was gathering momentum. The Chondokyo, Korea's only organized native religion, and some Korean Christians fomented the seeds of popular rebellion. On the 1st of March, 1919, 33 leaders of the movement signed the Korean Declaration of Independence. Waving Korean flags, people demonstrated all over the country. Reaction was ruthless. Police fired into unarmed crowds. 6,000 were killed, 15,000 wounded, 50,000 arrested. Japan set out to obliterate Korean national identity. The Korean language was forbidden. Books in the Korean alphabet were burned. Korean names were changed to Japanese names. Japanese were the lords of Korea for fully 35 years. Several of those years were made even more grueling by the added hardships of World War II. The occupation lasted until that war was brought to its terrible conclusion.
Just 35 miles east of Seoul is Panmunjom, where after long, ugly arguments, the armistice was signed that ended the Korean War. It's a melancholy place, but some visitors, particularly Americans, make the trip.
World War II had ended in August of 1945. It was peace, at last. Peace with foreboding. Korea had been liberated, but by previous agreement among the big powers, Korea was cut in two with surgical precision at the 38th parallel. The North was in the grip of the Soviets. The South policed by the United States. Supervised elections were proposed for the whole country. North Korea rejected them. They were held anyway, but only in the South. On August 15, 1948, the United Nations declared the Republic of Korea to be the legitimate government of the southern half of the peninsula. June 25th, 1950. As U.S. General Douglas MacArthur described it, North Korea struck like a cobra. Armed by their Soviet mentors, the People's Army of the North crossed the 38th parallel and launched a full-scale invasion. 40 miles of heavy artillery opened fire. Brigades of tanks roared southward. The ROK Army, Army of the South Korean Republic, was driven back. It lacked both tanks and effective anti-tank weapons. The government fled, and the invaders occupied the capital. Of the South's 65,000 defenders, nearly half had been killed or wounded. The free world was outraged. Under a United Nations resolution, a 16-nation fighting force was sent in under the command of General Douglas MacArthur. The capital was retaken. The invaders were driven north beyond the 38th parallel, and MacArthur was forcing the war into their own territory. Then China threw its troops into the fray on the side of the North Koreans. The war stalemated on a seesaw of advances and retreats by both sides. After 2 bitter years at the conference table, hostilities ended in a truce. A demilitarized zone was established. Now the decree that had cleaved Korea was sealed by bloodshed. In South Korea, recovery was agonizingly slow. The war had lasted 37 months, leaving 2 million dead, most of them civilians, leaving 5 million homeless, starving refugees, leaving an estimated $3 billion in property damage. But there was another kind of agony, the birth pangs of a genuine democracy. Democracy isn't easy even for those nations that have been at it the longest. After centuries of autocratic kings and Confucianist elders, the fledgling democracy of South Korea was tumultuously touch and go. Now they're demonstrating to a watching world that democracy isn't easy, but it works. The nation is progressing steadily, at times dramatically. It has dug into its bloodied soil and increased agricultural output. Its high-yield countryside abounds in vegetable patches, grain fields, orchards, and rice paddies. Its industrial base is growing, and Korea is increasingly recognized as a source of high skills and quality production. As a result, new industrial complexes sparkle on the skyline. Korea supplies a world market with everything from needlework to animated cartoons for TV commercials, from quality craftsmanship to high tech. Through an uphill history that would have had it otherwise, Korea has held fast. In a few decades, it's become a showplace of the Far East. As a host to the International Olympics, it has joined fully the world family of progressive nations. And despite the scars of successive invasions, including the terrible one in our own time, it remains a beautiful land.
Perhaps he had been looking back, observing the sufferings we have endured for so long. But now he sees our future, and he smiles.